If you listen to my podcast about procrastination, I literally recorded that this morning. I then went to the gym and I listened to a podcast episode about someone who shared their sexual abuse story. And I realized that I kind of have shared that I had a similar experience to that on my TikTok when there was this trend where people were sharing some stories that, often isn't shared on social media. And I realized that I've never actually gone into depth on my situation. It happened when I was 16 and my experience is nowhere near as tough, as challenging, as intense as I know some of you listeners may have had an experience that is. But I, for years and years and years, was ashamed and guilty and felt this just shame over the experience that I'd had. And I want to kind of share with you why that is. If you're in a room with children, maybe this is not the episode for that this time. You may want to keep this in your pocket and save it for later, but I do want to just share what happened. I feel like I've overcome any traumas from that episode, but you never know. Maybe I'll be in therapy one day and I'll realize that there's more to dig into, but that's also why I want to share it with you, because I just feel like maybe someone out there has gone through this and has never maybe even shared it with anyone, or just feel this inner guilt. And by me sharing this openly, maybe that will allow you to give yourself the permission to maybe open up about it, whether that being in booking a therapy session and opening up about it there, or just to someone in your surroundings that is close to you who you really trust to start that conversation. Because if you have this dark secret, let's call it, that you've never healed, I'm hoping that this episode maybe helps you start that healing process in whatever way feels right to you. So what happened when I was 16 is that I had this fling with a guy. We had hooked up. I don't drink today. And I think that that's because I started drinking very early. I think I started drinking when I was 13. In Denmark, that's quite normal. You can buy alcohol pretty much, or at least when I was a kid, you could, when you were 16. And if you went to the right stores, then even though we were just 13, they would still allow us to buy the alcohol. So we started drinking really early. And that's just how it was in Denmark. I can't speak from how it is now because I don't honestly know how it is now, but I'm thinking it's still pretty much the same thing. So I started drinking really young, which meant I also had sex very young. My first experience with that was very safe and a guy that I was in love with. And it was just a really good experience. But when I was 16, I had this little fling with this guy who was in an older class than me in high school. And a few months had gone and our fling had kind of stopped, but I still maybe had a little bit of a crush on him, especially when I had a few drinks and we were going out. And I had gone out with some girlfriends, but then this guy was like, I'm having an after party at my place. Maybe it was 2 a.m. and I went to his place with some of his friends. And we were partying, but I know I had way too much to drink. And I then decide, when you drink, then then because I'd had too much to drink, I fell asleep in his bedroom. I don't know why I decided to do that, but I blame the alcohol. I fell asleep in his bed. And I wake up the next morning, remembering very few clips. I just remember feeling very uncomfortable. I was completely naked. And I remember that the night before, while I was sleeping, someone had come in and taken off my clothes and said things and had sex with me, basically, while I was passed out. And said things like, I don't know how to say this without you can't even say this on a podcast. Suck my beep, you beep. I don't know. Is that okay to say on this podcast? I don't know. But things like that. And I just remember feeling very uncomfortable in my body and just waking up probably 6 a.m. or something, only a few hours of sleep, and then leaving. And I was by myself in the bed, so nobody was there. Taking the bus home and just feeling dirty. And showering for hours is just what I remember, and feeling uncomfortable. But at the time, I thought that it was that guy whose bed I had fallen asleep in that had come in and done that, which, because we had had sex previously, I felt like, even though I felt really uncomfortable and disgusting, it feels terrible even sharing this because I still have some embarrassment, I can tell. Because obviously, ugh, it just makes me feel uncomfortable. And I think that's why it's important for me to share this, because I'm sure if you've had an experience like this, it makes you uncomfortable as well. And also, I'm not someone who sleeps around. I haven't had sex for a year right now. I'm not someone who does that. Yeah, moving on. This is a messy podcast. I'm sorry. I think that's just how it's going to have to be, because it's sharing something that I haven't previously, and it's a little uncomfortable. But I'm doing it for anyone who needs it. So I feel terrible throughout the day, but because I think that it's this guy that I had already had sex with and I kind of had a crush on for a little while, I just kind of brush it off. I then, that night, I get a message from that guy that I had a fling with, the guy whose after party I'd been to. And he was like, did this guy come into the bedroom last night when you were sleeping? And that made me confused. I was like, I don't know, but you did. I hadn't even messaged him. I think I was in a little bit of a shock, maybe. And then we wrote back and forth. I don't even remember the complete conversation, but it goes something like this. We messaged back and forth, and I said, but I woke up naked, like you took off my clothes. And he was like, no, I didn't. I don't know if he even ever came in the room. But that's when we then find out that it's this other guy who I had never even talked to. But later I find out that this guy had done it to other girls as well. And that was maybe his thing of when a girl passed out at a party, then that's something he would do. And that just made me feel, I even feel disgusting just talking about it right now. I was in the beginning of this podcast, I'm fully healed from this. I feel no disgust anymore. And now as I'm talking about it, I can feel that there still definitely is something. But I realize it's him, and I just remember bawling my eyes out, feeling disgusting, crying in the shower, rinsing my body for hours, and just for a week, I remember feeling just laying in bed, just feeling miserable. And I spoke to my mom about it, which obviously was helpful. I think she maybe didn't even fully understand what had happened, because I had made it seem like it was no big deal, because I was so embarrassed, because I was the one who had blacked out at the party. I was the one who had drank too much. I was feeling like this was my fault, which, yes, you should not drink that much and pass out at a party, but you also shouldn't come into someone sleeping, take off their clothes and do that to them. So I just felt so ashamed, and spoke to my mom about it, decided what I was going to do. And I didn't want to press charges towards him. I didn't want to destroy his life. But what I did do was I called him up. And this is something that at the time was very big for me, because I wasn't a person who would speak up. Today, I speak up a lot more than I used to. I was a people pleaser who would never want to, even if it was something someone else had done wrong, I wouldn't speak up. Not even really to my parents, because I just wanted everyone to like me. But I remember getting this dude's phone number, calling him up and saying, don't ever do this to anybody ever again. And I remember really meaning it and feeling he took that, that he understood it. I think he did feel bad about it and knew that it was wrong what he had done. I'm sure some of you listening to me now are thinking you should press charges towards him now, which I don't know how to handle this kind of situation. That's not really me bringing this up again. It's making me question what to actually do now, today. Maybe some of you want to message me and let me know what you think I should do, because I don't know what the right thing is to do right now. So this is the thing. I, move on with my life. I go about my life. It didn't affect my sexual life. I think my parents have done a really good job at me growing up just being very feeling good with my body, like my naked body, if that makes sense. We've always just like, I think in Denmark, like you just swim in the ocean naked in the winter, like kind of thing. Like the naked body isn't like something to be embarrassed by, or they just did a really good job at making me feel comfortable in my body. And I think that helped a lot. It didn't affect my sexual life with like the partners I had after that, I feel. I never know if I go to a therapist and I realize that there's something that it did affect. But what did happen was that, I was affected, but then I move on with my life and I forget about it. I remembered it while I was in Denmark in high school, but then like after a few years and I moved to LA, I remember watching this Netflix show where a girl, like literally in the Netflix show, the exact same thing happened to her. And I'm like, damn, that happened to me too. And I had forgotten about it. I think that the reason I had forgotten about it is because the human body, if there's something that feels so uncomfortable and challenging to think about, like an actual trauma, we will hide it from our conscious mind because it feels too painful to think about. After, like, during therapy sessions or like self-development processes I've gone through in my 20s, I will remember things from my childhood. I'll remember certain things that maybe I had gone through that I had forgotten about because they were too hard for me to remember. But going back, digging into it and healing it, I think is very important for us to free ourselves and just create a better life. So I had forgotten about this, and from watching that TV show, I was watching it with a friend, and she starts opening up about the fact that she'd had like some experience similar. She wasn't like actually, her stepdad had done things to her that were not comfortable as a kid. It wasn't fully sex, but it was things that just didn't feel comfortable, and kids feel it. Even if it doesn't fully cross the line, like if there's a sexual tension from the adult's side, like I think it can traumatize any kid. So she opened up about that, and then I opened up about my experience, and I started talking about it again, and that's when I feel like I fully like healed it, which I don't know if I have, but I definitely feel okay talking with the world about it on this podcast. So I think a lot has happened. So yeah, I don't know who needed to hear this. I don't know who has experienced anything abusive in that way that maybe you haven't uncovered, healed fully. I don't know who needed to hear this to see a therapist or share it with your mom or a best friend. Just talking about it, I think, could help. It's definitely helped me opening up about it. And I remember, like, after that had happened, I didn't share it with my ex, my most recent relationship, for majority of our relationship. It wasn't till like a year and a half in, maybe, that I shared it with him. But I just remember it feeling good to not walk around with that secret anymore. And yeah, I just want you to not feel shame, not feel blame, because yes, I shouldn't have drank that alcohol. Yes, I shouldn't have fallen asleep in some guy's house while there were other people around. Like, absolutely, I should not have done those things. But this happened, and it made me feel really ashamed for a long time. And it felt really good to talk about it and work through it. So I'm just hoping that me sharing this would maybe help you too. As you can tell, this is not a topic that I usually share things that I feel like I'm maybe have some sort of expertise in, or at least like know to give advice on. But all I can say when it comes to this topic is hopefully you share it with someone who you trust, whether it being a therapist or a family member or a friend. I just want for you to stop feeling shameful or blaming yourself in any way, shape, or form. And please send it to someone if you know someone has dealt with this who maybe needs to hear this, then maybe share it with them. And just be loving and kind to yourself today. And let's make sure to be kind to strangers today and every day, or reach out to someone who maybe needs it. We never know what people are going through. We never know who really, really could use a hug or a smile right now. So let's make sure to do that today. It is almost getting bright outside, so now I'm gonna start my day after these 2 podcast episode recordings. I appreciate you so much for listening. Subscribe if you haven't, if you want to. And remember that in order for you to grow, you have to challenge your norm. Bye.